Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time if you have not seen my videos before. My name is Bryn, I am transgender and non-binary, and I make videos about those topics. Today I wanted to talk about something that played a significant role in my life, and it wasn't a good, I think in the end it ended up being good because I learned more about myself, but in the midst of all of it, I felt lost, I felt confused, I felt frustrated, I felt angry, I felt alone. Like any bad feeling you can feel is probably how I felt. What I'm talking about is the portion of my life where I identified as a trans woman. Before I really get into the video, first I want to say thank you to everyone who reached out and gave me the names of different non-binary YouTubers. I have a whole list in my description box down below. I also have my social media. If I don't really post a whole lot on social media, but if you want to reach out to me, you're welcome to reach out to me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I might not respond right away, but I will get to you. Or you can always comment down below. I do respond to those every few days as well. Oh, and I have my jewelry linked down below too. All of that will be down in the description box down below. But let's get started with the story. So before I get started, I am getting started with the story, but before I really pinpoint that period in my life, I kind of want to talk about what was leading up to it. So when I was about, I want to say 10 or 11, it was the summer after my 5th grade. I remember that. I found out that one of my parents was transgender. And by found out, I mean she came to me and she talked to me and told me that she was a trans woman. But she also talked to my sister and my brother as well. And I've been vague about this in the past. I've said, oh, I have a family member who's trans, but I did speak to her and she said she was okay with me telling people that she's my mom. So that's what I'm doing because it is kind of relevant. You know, this is somebody that we didn't really, I wouldn't say we, before she transitioned, she was very depressed, so I wasn't super close to her as a kid, but of course, you know, I lived with her for the first 10 or 11 years of my life, and so like I obviously had some sort of like bond with her, and then she transitioned, and so this was the first trans person I ever met, and specifically the first trans woman I ever met. And we didn't really talk a whole lot about her gender stuff because what had happened was my other mom, she's very religious, she's a Christian, so, you know, a stereotypical Christian, which is exactly what she is, isn't really all that keen about being married to any woman, let alone a trans woman. So she ended up kicking out my other mom, and I didn't really have a relationship with her very much until I got older. But the reason that I wanted to bring that up is she is the first trans woman I ever met, and to me that was like the mold of what a trans woman was supposed to be or look like or whatever. And so that was kind of stuck in my head. Fast forward a few years, I came out as gay. It was my freshman year of high school, I came out as gay, and that actually ended up being really beneficial for me because I had felt this pressure to be a regular guy or whatever for a little while, especially for my family because like I said, I was raised Christian, so, which also, I do have a video on that. I will have that up here and in the description box down below as well. But, you know, being raised a Christian or just in general in society, there's these expectations of what men are supposed to be like. But I really never did identify with the term man or masculine or anything like that. So I never felt those expectations, but I had those expectations placed on me. And when I came out as gay, I still probably had those expectations from my family, but I really didn't have those expectations from the people around me because gay men are not expected to be masculine. It's actually implied that gay men can't be masculine, which is like not even true. But it did work out for me in my favor because those expectations were released from most of the people around me, simply because I liked men. So that helped me feel free in my gender because as a gay guy, I wasn't like a gay guy that like wore a bunch of makeup or like acted super feminine or like, I didn't even paint my nails or anything then. Like really, I was just like, I felt neutral, I think. I felt neutral in general. I didn't really know that at the time. I didn't really think about my gender at the time. But I felt I didn't have to uphold masculine stereotypes, and I also didn't have to uphold feminine stereotypes. So the problem, as you can probably figure out, that came with coming out as a trans woman was suddenly I felt like I had all these expectations or whatever to fill. Part of this was, a big part of this, was because I was raised Christian, and the rhetoric that I heard about my mother, the one who is transgender, was very much the belief that she wasn't really trans, and she's gonna come back, and she's gonna be your dad, and she's gonna be my husband, because this is my other mom saying this, you know, and all this stuff, basically just invalidating everything that she's felt for like her entire life, and put behind her and hid for most of her life. And so I heard all this stuff, and I internalized it. And so when I came out as a trans woman, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I have to be as feminine as I can, because if I have any part left of me that's not feminine, no one will take me seriously. Everyone will think I'm a guy. I will never get to be who I want to be, this and that, this and that, and this and that. This and that, you know, whatever. That was my mindset. In order to not be a guy or not be seen as a guy, I have to be seen as a woman. And I will say, before I keep going, looking back, I definitely had dysphoria over like social interactions and my body, but at the time I did not feel like I had dysphoria. I did not look at my body with disgust. I did not, you know, it was not something that was super intense. I felt off. And so then when I came out as a trans woman and I felt, wow, I really have to be feminine now, it was worse. It was worse than the feelings that I had as a gay guy, because like I said, as a gay guy, I felt free to basically just be me, and there were no expectations placed on me. I could be as feminine as I wanted to because I was gay, or I could be as masculine as I wanted to because I was a guy, and I just did neither of those things. But I had the opportunity to basically be whatever I wanted to be. And so then when I came out as this trans woman, I felt so constricted. And at this point, I had met one other transgender person. He was a friend of mine at the time, and he's a trans guy. I went to high school with him. And both he and my mother have similar stories or experiences, in the sense that they knew from a very young age that they were trans, and they've been adamant about it ever since they've come to grasp it. And I did not feel adamant at all that I was a trans woman, but I felt like I had to keep pushing for it, because if I didn't, everyone would think I was a guy, and I knew that didn't feel right. I also had, I obviously there wasn't a whole lot of non-binary representation. This was back in, let's see, 7 years ago, so like 2013 or 14 or something. Yeah, 2014, that's when I graduated high school. So, and I don't know if people are more educated now, or if I've just been more like involved with the trans and non-binary community, that it feels like everyone knows about trans and non-binary people. But yeah, at the time, I didn't know other trans people. I certainly didn't know other non-binary people. And the one non-binary person that I have in my mind, I don't think they were medically transitioning or anything like that, which of course there's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't relate to that person, and I barely knew them. Like, I knew them from Facebook. I don't think I ever met them. But like, I didn't relate in that way because I like was medically transitioning. So what ended up happening when I came out as a trans woman and I felt like I had all these expectations, I decided I'm gonna be more feminine. I started wearing makeup. I was letting my hair grow out, which was something I always wanted long hair. So that wasn't like weird for me. And actually my hair was shorter. It was probably only down to here. It was like curly. It was like cute. It was actually really cute. I'll leave if I can find a cute photo. I have this one in my head where I had like red hair. I'm gonna leave that in here if I can find it. But regardless, I started wearing makeup. I wore dresses a lot. I changed, well, obviously I changed my name and my pronouns and stuff like that. But all the things that I was doing externally didn't feel like me. Besides growing out my hair, I didn't enjoy wearing makeup. I didn't enjoy wearing dresses. I felt pretty, which was like a good compliment, but like I didn't feel like me. I didn't feel at home. I felt less at home like that than I did as a gay guy. And that was confusing because I'm like, how, okay. And then I'm like, well, then am I just a gay guy? And I'm like, no, because I've always had dysphoria over my downstairs area. And so that was confusing. I'm like, how can I be a guy if I don't even want that? Which obviously I know, like gender and body are not always like there's no right way to be trans and blah, blah, blah. But that was like something that I really struggled with because I was like, I have never liked what I have down there. I've always wanted something different. And I just didn't, I don't know. It was confusing. I didn't feel like a guy and I didn't feel like a girl. And guess what? I still feel that way. But now I have a label and a term and people who watch me and validate me and friends and people who use my pronouns and talk about me the way I want to be talked about. And, you know, but at the time I felt like it was so crazy to not be a boy or a girl, even though I know that I remember being like young, like anywhere between like 9 to 11 years old, something like that. There was something on TV about somebody who didn't identify as a boy or girl. And my mom, the religious one, came in and I tried to like explain it to her that sometimes people don't feel like a boy or girl. And she was just kind of like, what? Which like understandable. She'd never heard of that before. But like, of course, that like, I remember that because it made my heart fall to the floor. And I didn't even know that I was non-binary. I didn't even know that I felt that way. But it was like, she said that and I was like, okay, I can't feel this way. Even though I didn't know that I did, it was like, just know that this is never an option. So when I was out as a trans woman, I was very confused. I was conflicted. I was frustrated. I remember on Christmas Day, it was like the nighttime though. I almost said Christmas Eve, but that's not Eve. It's Christmas Day Eve, or I don't know, that evening, Christmas evening, that is what I am trying to say. Christmas evening, I was so depressed. Like, it was just like one of those things, like I couldn't say how I felt because I didn't even know what I felt. And I hate that, which is why I am so crisp and clear when I share my feelings on here. I've really learned to be able to digest and dissect my feelings and put them into words that make sense to me and to others. At the time, I didn't know how to do that. And I remember my best friend at the time met me at a Sheetz gas station. I don't know if they have Sheetz everywhere, but they do where I live. And I basically was telling her how confused I was. I was like saying I didn't know if I was a trans girl, but I also didn't think I was a guy, but I didn't know. And I remember like she was very supportive. She had no idea what I was talking about because I had no idea how to express it. Plus she's like a cisgender straight woman. So like to her, like this is all not like nonsense, but it was foreign to her, I guess I should say. And so of course, like she was really sweet. She's like, I will always support you and whatever you want. I really don't know how to help because I don't know what you're saying. But I love you and I care about you and blah, blah, blah. And that's, you know, that's how friends should be if they don't understand something. But I remember that because that was one of the most depressed days that I had. I remember once being at Target and looking at the men's section and wanting to go in there to shop and then telling myself, no, you can't do that anymore because you're not a boy. And it made me really sad. I was like, oh my God, I can never do that again. But now we have this. So clearly I did it again. But that's how I felt at the time. I felt like, okay, I can't be doing this ever again. And it felt so restrictive because I had in my mind that I had to look the same way that my mother looked, because she was the example of a trans woman that I had been given. And even the other trans women that I've seen were still feminine. I'd never seen a butch trans woman. I'd never seen an androgynous trans woman. They were all feminine, which is fine. Like, I'm not like saying that's a bad experience to have. If that's how you feel and that's what you want to do, then do it. But because it was the only thing that I saw, I felt like I had to be it, not that I wanted to. And that was where the problem came into play. And I never talked to her really about it. And I never talked to my friend at the time about it, about how I was feeling confused and stuff like that, because I was really worried that they were going to judge me, or I was so terrified. And this is something that I think a lot of trans people go through. But I was so terrified to be told that you're not actually trans, because I don't even know why that terrified me so much, but it felt humiliating. So I like kept all these feelings inside, except for my one friend that I shared that with. And I don't even remember why I shared it with her. Like, I mean, she was supportive. She's like, I'll always support you. I'll always love you, you know? And that meant a lot to me, of course. But I'm not sure like what made me think I should like tell her about this. But I didn't feel like I could go to cisgender people for the most part, because they don't even understand trans things. So if I'm coming to them and saying, well, I'm not really a trans woman, I'm like just really confused, I felt like their initial reaction would be, well, then you're not really trans and you're just this confused gay boy or whatever. And then I didn't feel like I could go to trans people, because all the trans people around me had this experience of just knowing for their entire life. And I had signs that showed that I wasn't a boy or whatever, that I didn't adhere to masculine stereotypes, but I didn't know that I was non-binary from the time that I was really little. And I didn't have the context, I didn't have the words, I didn't have anything like that. So it is like, I felt so alone, I felt so isolated from the world, I felt confused, because now I've been telling everyone that I'm a trans woman, and I'm like, I was like, I can't go back. I can't say that I'm a guy now, because then no one will take me seriously, because I know I'm not a guy, and then I'll figure out something later, and then, you know, whatever. And that was the same thing when I did start to research non-binary people and understand non-binary people, and I met non-binary people. I was like, wow, like this really seems like me, but I'm really scared that if I come out as non-binary, everyone is gonna think that I am detransitioning. And I was terrified of that. It just felt so invalidating, like anything. And I was always in my head, you know, there's things, like I still get in my head about what I have down here. I have rarely met another person who cares at all. You know, like I've dated plenty of straight guys and they don't care. My last partner is a lesbian, she didn't care. But in my head, I still worry that people will care. And I am going to get bottom surgery. It's not because I think other people care. It's simply because I know that that's one thing that I've known from very early on that I want to have done. But the actual gender part of all of it, I didn't really know until the last few years. So yeah, so being a trans woman was really confusing. I will say, I think, so I do not identify as a trans woman, obviously, anymore. But I do think that had I seen butch trans women or whatever, or androgynous trans women, I think I would have been more comfortable identifying as a trans woman, because most of my discomfort with being considered a woman or identifying as a woman, a big portion of it, not all of it, but a big portion of it was the expectations that I believed I had to fill, rather than the actual identity itself. And so a lot of it was not only me figuring out that I'm non-binary, but also me realizing that trans women can be butch, trans women can be androgynous, trans men can be feminine, like, you know what I mean? But it was like I kind of unraveled all that at the same time. And the reason that I don't identify as a woman is not because I'm androgynous, because women can be androgynous, trans women included. But it's at my core, like when I don't know exactly how to explain it, but at my core, I don't feel like a woman. I feel like women make sense to me. I feel like that kind of stuff, but I don't feel like at my core, I'm just like a woman who likes to dress more guyish like or something. Like I don't, sometimes every once in a while I feel that way, but for the most part, I don't, which I have other videos about. Maybe I'll make a video about specifically why I don't identify as a trans woman, like just an androgynous trans woman or whatever. I don't know, but regardless. So when I started figuring out about being non-binary, but I was still externally, you know, telling people I'm a trans woman. I started figuring out about non-binary people because I had begun, it sounds so weird, dating a trans guy who was pretty involved with the LGBT center that we had in our area. And because I started dating him, I started going there more, and I really got involved with people. There were a lot of non-binary people there, but my problem still was all the non-binary people that I met, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I guess I don't know, but I was pretty sure they were all assigned female at birth, and a lot of them consider themselves to be trans masculine. And so I didn't relate with that, or I didn't feel connected, I guess, to that, but I did get to see people, just people being non-binary and not following gender roles. And that really helped me a lot. And eventually I just decided I'm gonna come out as non-binary. Like I can't keep pretending to be a woman, basically. I started seeing non-binary people and I realized that's me. But I still felt disconnected. I still felt like non-binary wise, there was like assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. Assigned male at birth people can do these things, and assigned female at birth people can do these things. And it wasn't until last summer, so like a little bit over a year ago, maybe a year and a half, something like that, where I really started to challenge, I guess, all gender norms from every aspect. And I've talked about this in other videos before. I had moved my partner and I broke up. I moved away, like an hour and a half away. Basically, nobody there knew me besides my brother and a childhood friend. And I felt like I was finally free to dress like a guy without people inherently seeing me as a guy because they didn't know who I used to be. And I was always worried that, like, okay, if I dressed like this around people who knew me from school or knew me from my childhood or whatever, they just look at me and basically be like, so you're just a guy. But doing this in an area where nobody knew who I used to be, I felt so much more confident because I felt like a lot of them would look at me and assume that I was a trans person who was assigned female at birth. Whether I was like a trans guy or like a non-binary person or whatever, I felt like people had nothing to latch onto to determine my gender because they didn't know who I used to be. And that was the biggest freedom aha moment ever. And I carried that with me back when I moved back home. And I'm really happy I did. I feel so much more confident now. But yeah, that portion of my life where I was out as a trans woman, not just because I was a trans woman, but because of all the feminine expectations that I felt like were tied to it. That was just so confusing. And to be non-binary and to think your only two options are male and female is just like, what? Like, it's so confusing. Like, and so then, you know, and I felt like invalidated, or that I would be invalidated if I told anyone that I was confused. So I just felt like really alone, you know, until I started seeing other non-binary people, and then I felt at home. But yeah, so that is my story about being a trans woman and how terrible that was. Although, of course, if you're watching this and you're a trans woman, or even if you're a non-binary person who feels comfortable being perceived as a trans woman, or like, you know, whatever, obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it was like just really terrible. And I had no one to turn to. I felt like I had no one to turn to. I don't know if at that point, if I even knew the term non-binary, or if I did know the term, if I logically connected it with myself enough to be able to research like non-binary identities. I do remember at one point I did research about being non-binary when I was 19 or 20, something like that. I specifically remember I stayed up like all night and I was watching this non-binary YouTuber, and they were assigned female at birth, but the way that they identified in terms of like being androgynous and stuff like that is exactly how I identify. And I remember like, I'm like, yes, I agree with every single point on here, but I don't feel like the term fits me. And it just took me a while to kind of come around to the actual label, which again, if you're not cool with labels, that's fine too. But yeah, so that is my story. I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a nice day.